He's a thief, she accused a 5-year-old black boy in the park. But she didn't see the nanny recording everything. The scream tore through the sweltering afternoon air in the park. He stole. That kid took it from my son. Karen Whitmore's voice rang out, sharp, shrill, and made several heads turn at once. Her outstretched finger shook with rage, pointed straight at little Malik, who froze with the green toy car in his hands. His eyes widened. He said nothing, just stood there, chest rising and falling, confused, as the woman stormed toward him with furious steps. Karen was white, with light brown, slightly wavy hair hastily tied back. Her features were tense, her face flushed from the heat, and a burning indignation mixed with something else, a warped sense of authority. She wore a plain white t-shirt and light-washed jeans, her posture rigid, like someone who believed her words alone could deliver justice. "Put that down right now," she yelled, looming over the boy. "You reached into my baby's diaper bag. I saw you." Malik instinctively clutched the car to his chest and took a step back. His lower lip trembled. Tears welled in his eyes. He didn't understand why this woman was shouting. It was just a toy car. It had been on the ground. He picked it up to play. That was all. That's when Tanya Brooks arrived, holding her phone at chest level, camera already rolling. She moved quickly, but with control. Her eyes were steady, her expression hardened by the protective instinct that kicked in the moment she heard the yelling. She was a black woman, with dark brown skin and well-kept curly hair pulled into a low bun. Beige t-shirt, jeans, simple sneakers, a model of calm strength. She didn't shout, she didn't rush, she recorded. "What are you doing to him?" Tanya asked, her voice low but firm. Karen didn't even glance at the nanny. Her eyes stayed locked on Malik, who now trembled, clutching the toy as if it were a shield. "This boy reached into my bag," Karen barked. "He stole my son's toy. I saw him. He just grabbed it like he owns the place." "He didn't take anything of yours," Tanya replied, still holding the phone steady, filming Karen's face. "That toy was on the ground. I saw it. And he's just a child. He's 5. "I don't care," Karen shouted, now turning to Tanya. "That kind of child learns early what's wrong, and they learn with a spanking." He reached into the bag and took it. Tanya didn't flinch. The camera didn't shake. The park, once full of kids' laughter and casual conversation, began to quiet in waves. A few mothers stood from the benches. A father in the back pulled out his phone. People were watching, but no one had stepped in yet. Malik looked at Tanya, eyes now filled with tears that threatened to spill. "I didn't do anything," he whispered softly. Karen heard him. She stepped closer and in a lower tone but laced with venom let the words slip. "It's always the same. They never do anything, always have an excuse. But we know. They're all the same." The silence in the park turned into a solid, pressing tension. Tanya took a breath, closed her eyes briefly, then pointed the phone directly at Karen's face. "Say that again," she said. Karen hesitated. She looked around and noticed other phones being raised. The authority in her expression began to falter, giving way to something less certain, maybe surprise, maybe fear. "You're recording me? This is a violation of privacy," she said, trying to steady her breathing. "You just screamed at a 5-year-old child, accused him of stealing, and used words that could be considered a racial slur. This isn't a violation, it's evidence," Tanya replied, serious. Karen opened her mouth to argue, but no sound came. She looked at Malik, then at Tanya, then at the watching eyes around her. She knew she had crossed a line. A tall black man, wearing a casual grey suit and carrying himself with quiet authority, was striding toward the scene. Marcus Johnson. His gaze shifted from Karen to Tanya and finally settled on Malik, who was still holding the car and now softly sobbing. "What happened here?" he asked, voice low and deep, the kind that didn't need volume to command attention. Tanya responded without lowering the phone. "This woman accused Malik of stealing, said he reached into her bag and took her son's toy. But the toy was on the ground. I saw it. And she verbally attacked him. All of it was recorded." Karen stood frozen. Marcus looked at his son, knelt down and gently embraced him. Malik clung to him tightly. "She yelled at me, Daddy. I just picked it up because it was on the ground. Marcus looked into his son's eyes, nodded calmly, and then stood up. You're okay now. I'm here. Then he turned to Karen. You didn't think twice before judging my son, and you didn't even realize you were being filmed. Now you'll have to answer for it. Karen tried to mumble a defense, but the words evaporated as other parents began approaching. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others filmed from a distance. The quiet force of collective disapproval filled the space. Tanya ended the recording and gently took Malik's hand. Marcus placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Thank you. You saved my son from something that could have marked him for life. Tanya nodded without saying a word, and while Karen Whitmore stood alone in the middle of the park, facing the invisible weight of mounting pressure, Malik walked away slowly, the toy car still in his hands, and the certainty that this time, the injustice would not be ignored. The sound of the recording echoed from Tanya's phone speakers, now on a continuous loop. She was seated in the back seat of the Johnson family's silver SUV, with Malik asleep beside her, still clutching the green toy car like it was a part of him. Marcus sat in the front seat, driving in silence. The car moved steadily through the residential neighborhoods of Madison, but the atmosphere inside was heavy, dense with the kind of silence shared by those who understand too well how injustice works. The recording ended, then started again. That boy reached into my bag. I don't care. They're all the same. Karen Whitmore's words, so clear, seemed crueler with every repetition. Tanya turned off the sound and looked toward the detective in front. I posted it, just now, on my personal profile, she said slowly. The caption is simple. I just wrote, "She accused my boy of stealing, see for yourselves." I didn't use her name. Marcus nodded slightly, his eyes fixed on the road. He took a deep breath before speaking. It'll spread. Fast. People are going to see what she did. I know, Tanya replied. And they need to. The first notification came in less than 10 minutes, then 10 more, then 50. Within an hour, the video had surpassed 300,000 views. Within 2, it passed 1 million. On Twitter, the hashtag Justice for Malik began trending fast. On TikTok, influencers shared clips of the video with outraged commentary, while legal experts, activists, and mothers across the country reposted it with messages like, "This happens every day," but this time, it was caught on camera. In a downtown coffee shop, a law student in her 20s and active Reddit user was watching the video on her laptop, zooming in frame by frame. She paused on the moment Karen said, "They're all the same," and began looking for visual clues. The type of wedding ring she wore, the stroller brand, her earring style, the faint logo on her t-shirt. Small details, but to the internet, they're pieces of a larger social puzzle. 3 hours after the original post, Karen Whitmore's full name was trending at the top of local search rankings. Karen didn't notice right away. She was busy trying to keep up a forced routine at home with her young son, cooking lunch with her phone on silent. That's when an old college friend sent her a direct message. Are you in that video? The woman from the park? Karen froze. She grabbed her phone, unlocked it, and within seconds saw her face plastered across dozens of posts, edited videos zooming in on her pointing finger, influencer reactions. Blog headlines reading, "White woman accuses 5-year-old black boy of theft at Madison Park. Video goes viral." Karen dropped her phone onto the counter. "No," she whispered in shock. She tried to defend herself. She made a post explaining her side of the story. "I was protecting my son. That boy took the toy without asking. Yes, I lost my temper, but I never meant to offend anyone." But the comment was met with a flood of furious replies, screenshots, and proof that the video told a different story. People hadn't forgotten the phrase, "They're all the same." It was impossible to erase. Karen received the first threat that same night, a direct message on Instagram. "We're going to find you, no more room for racists." Second threat, a plain envelope in the mailbox. Inside, a single sheet of paper with the words, "Be careful what you sow." Third threat, an anonymous phone call at 2 a.m., only heavy breathing on the other end of the line. Karen started sleeping poorly, changed all her passwords, took a leave from work. But on Monday at 8:15 a.m., HR called, "Ms. Whitmore, we saw the video. The board has decided to term..." She hung up before they finished the sentence. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Journalists called. TV show emails flooded in. Friends messaged to distance themselves. Panic came in waves. Meanwhile, at the Johnson home, Tanya showed Marcus the numbers. The video had already surpassed 5 million views in under 24 hours. The family's attorney, who was already involved, recommended preparing a lawsuit. That's when the doorbell rang. Marcus opened the door to find attorney Jordan Ellis, holding a folder and wearing a determined expression. "Good evening, I came in person. This is gaining traction. And we have grounds to file a suit for child abuse, with the added charge of racial injury." Marcus nodded. Tanya, sitting on the couch with Malik asleep in her lap, looked on in silence. "What do you recommend?" Marcus asked plainly. "Sue. Civil court. Claim for emotional and psychological damages. State law supports us, and we have the video. It's irrefutable." Marcus crossed his arms, took a deep breath. His face remained composed, but inside he felt the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about Malik anymore. It was about every child like him, every parent like him. "Do what needs to be done, Jordan. We're going all the way." That night, Karen spent hours reading through her own comments. Someone had posted her address. Her inbox was overflowing. She walked around the house with the lights off, locking windows, suspicious of every shadow. The next day, she called a real estate agent. "I need to move, now. Out of state, if possible." The justice system hadn't formally begun its process yet, but in the digital square, in the court of public opinion, Karen Whitmore had already been judged, condemned, and isolated. And the video she ignored that day at the park was now the centerpiece of a storm that couldn't be stopped. The studio lights reflected off the white news desk, and the sign in the background flashed blue. Focus News, live. Anchor. Rachel Monroe sat upright as she adjusted the papers in front of her. Known for her direct approach to sensitive social issues, she was the kind of woman who didn't flinch in the face of controversy. Tonight, our top story, the video of a false accusation against a 5-year-old black child is mobilizing the nation, she said, looking directly into the camera. The incident took place in Madison, Wisconsin, where the child's nanny recorded the confrontation and posted it on social media. The video went viral within hours. And now the consequences are unfolding in real time. The screen beside Rachel showed the clip of Tanya, steady and composed, phone in hand, shielding Malik as Karen screamed in anger. The sound of the theft accusation and the racial insult echoed again, this time on national television. Once more, America watched. Across town in a room with closed curtains, Karen watched the same footage, her hands trembling. Her phone had stopped ringing. It now sat powered off and forgotten on the table. Her face was pale, drawn, as if 10 years had passed in 3 days. On the TV, the reporter continued, "Identified as Karen Whitmore, the woman appears accusing Malik Johnson, son of Detective Marcus Johnson, of theft. The child had a toy car that was found on the ground at the park. So far, there is no evidence that any theft occurred." Karen shut off the TV with force. She stood up suddenly and began pacing the room, back and forth, as if trying to escape something invisible. "I'm not racist," she whispered to herself, voice low. "I was just protecting my son. But even she no longer seemed to believe it. The words caught in her throat. Because deep down, she knew what she had said. She knew the tone she'd used. She knew that boy was never a threat. And still, at Jordan Ellis's law office, preparations were underway. Jordan sat at her desk, analyzing the case materials with a cold, strategic focus. Her eyes scanned the video frame by frame, examining every gesture, every word. Beside her, Marcus stood with his arms crossed. "The case is solid. We have everything we need," Jordan said. "I've drafted the claim for emotional and psychological damages. I'm including the aggravating factor of child abuse given the emotional impact on Malik. The proposed amount, $500,000. Marcus didn't react immediately, but the weight of the moment showed in his eyes. This wasn't about money. It was about respect, about ensuring his son grew up knowing that no one had the right to humiliate him and walk away unpunished. "And if she doesn't pay," he asked, "she'll face legal consequences. We can petition for asset seizure, account freezes. She'll be held accountable." Meanwhile, Malik's face appeared on news site homepages, alongside headlines like, "5-year-old black boy falsely accused at park. Video sparks national outrage. Justice for Malik, the case that exposed everyday racism. When a nanny recorded what no one wants to see." The public wanted to know more. Who was the father? How was the boy doing? What would Karen do next? At the park, where it all began, now nearly empty, Tanya walked slowly, holding Malik's hand. The media was gone. The scandal was still raging online, but the space had returned to its natural state. Dry leaves still scattered the ground. Wooden benches remained. Children's laughter could be heard in the distance. Malik looked around, recognizing the place. His face grew serious for a moment. "Is this where she yelled at me?" Tanya nodded slowly. "Yes, sweetheart. Right here." "Is she going to yell again?" "No." Tanya knelt in front of him. "Because now, everyone knows what she did was wrong. And you did the right thing." He gripped the green toy car tighter in his hands, thought for a moment, then looked at Tanya. "I was scared. And even scared, you stood strong. That's what being brave means, Malik." That same night, Jordan personally delivered the filed lawsuit. Karen, now temporarily staying at her sister's house, received the court notice. Her expression was one of shock, but not surprise. 50,000? No, 500,000, she whispered as she read the figure. "For child abuse with racial aggravation, that's the damage you caused," Jordan replied firmly, locking eyes with her. Karen stood frozen. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just felt. For the first time, she seemed to truly grasp the weight of what she had done. Hours later, the Johnson family's attorney issued a public statement. "This lawsuit is not about revenge. It's a clear message. Black children are not threats. They are not targets. And anyone who dares treat them that way will face the consequences." The crowd surrounding him erupted in applause. Among them, Marcus stood silently. He wasn't a man of speeches, but when a reporter approached and asked, "Mr. Johnson, what do you hope the country learns from this?" He looked at her without hesitation. "That enough is enough. This crossed the line a long time ago." On millions of phone screens, the frozen image still circulated. Karen finger-pointed, Malik eyes wide, the toy car clutched tightly in his hands. A moment captured, a reflection of what so many live through in silence. But now the silence had been broken. Karen looked out the window and pulled the curtain back with the tip of her fingers, afraid someone might see her. Outside, a white van with a local news logo had been parked since early afternoon. A man in a baseball cap, camera slung over his shoulder, paced the sidewalk waiting for something to happen. Karen's face, once polished and confident, now looked worn and pale. Deep shadows circled her eyes, and her hair was haphazardly tied back. Since the court notice and the widespread exposure of the video, she had barely left the house. She lived in fear, slept little, had changed her phone number 3 times in 1 week. But it didn't help. The cancellation had gone beyond social media. It had entered real life. The previous morning, a group of teenagers passed in front of her house with speakers, looping the audio from the recording. "They're all the same." Karen covered her ears, but the words seemed glued to the walls of her living room. Online, every detail of her life had already been uncovered. Users dug up old photos, past comments, posts with questionable language, likes on controversial profiles. She had become the symbol of everything a generation wanted to fight. And no one wanted to hear her side. Instagram pages created collages of her face with captions like, "This woman humiliated a 5-year-old child over a toy." On TikTok, slow-motion videos repeated the scene of her pointing her finger, while voices narrated, "This is structural racism in its purest form." She tried to defend herself, recorded a video, eyes red, saying, "I'm a mother. I was upset. I thought I didn't think, please but the comments exploded within seconds. Of course you didn't think, that's the problem. You shattered a child's sense of safety with your yelling. Now live with it. Meanwhile, Malik, though still very young, was beginning to feel the ripple effects. His parents limited his screen time, but they couldn't shield him from the world. At school, everyone knew. Teachers treated him with overprotective caution. Other kids asked confusing questions. "Were you the one on TV?" one of them asked. "Did you go to jail?" another said. Without malice, just the innocent ignorance of childhood. Marcus watched it all with sorrow. He wasn't one to dramatize. He was composed, direct. But seeing his son hesitate before stepping onto the school playground, lowering his head when passing unfamiliar adults, broke something inside him. One night, he sat next to Malik and spoke plainly. "You're a good boy, smart, and brave. What that woman did was wrong. She tried to make you look like something you're not, but the world saw the truth. And now, the truth is what protects you." Malik nodded but didn't speak. He just held the green toy car tighter. Karen didn't have the same support system. Even her sister, who had given her a temporary place to stay, asked her to leave. "It's affecting my job, Karen. My kids. I can't do this anymore." She cried, begged, but had to pack her things. She moved into a roadside motel where no one recognized her. There, she filled out forms to sell her car, consulted a lawyer to negotiate the lawsuit, and browsed real estate listings in small towns. The plan was to disappear, become unrecognizable, reinvent herself far from the spotlight. But even for that, it was too late. The lawsuit moved forward. The media reported the amount set. Karen Whitmore will be required to pay $500,000 to the family of Malik Johnson. She nearly fainted when she saw the headline. Her attorney explained, "Yes, the amount is symbolic, but it's more than that. It's reparative. It's justice for trauma caused to a minor. And you were recorded. The whole world saw." Karen just nodded. Her face was blank, as if she herself wasn't even there anymore. Meanwhile, Marcus, Tanya, and Jordan were preparing for a press conference. It was a necessary response, not just for Malik, but for all the families who saw themselves in that pain. "It's not just about Karen," Jordan said. "It's about what she represents, about how racism shows up, even in places as ordinary as a park." Tanya stood in the background next to Malik. She dressed modestly, but her presence was powerful, the woman who had the courage to film, the one who didn't stay silent. "You're going to have to speak," Marcus said gently. "People need to hear from the person who was there, who protected my son." Tanya hesitated. She wasn't one for the spotlight, but she took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, not for me, for him." By the end of that week, the local network aired the beginning of the press conference. Malik was kept off camera, as he should have been, but Tanya was there. Holding the microphone, she looked squarely at the reporters and said, "I recorded it because I've seen this happen before, and no one believed it. I recorded it because this isn't the first time a black boy was accused without proof. And because if it hadn't been on video, they might have believed her again." And finally, what started as a scream in a park became a cry from many, and that cry will not be silenced. The room erupted in applause, and Marcus stood watching silently. A man of presence, but at that moment, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, and also, for the first time in days, a real breath of relief. Karen watched it all on the screen of her old laptop, lying on a hotel bed somewhere. Her face was marked, alone. The TV played in the background with the sound off, and faced with everything she had lost, her job, her home, her social standing, only one question remained, one she didn't dare speak aloud. How did I end up here? The microphone picked up every breath with clarity. The town hall chamber was packed, cameras positioned, journalists clustered together, microphones bearing major network logos lined up across the podium. In silence, everyone awaited the arrival of Marcus Johnson. When he walked in, there was no fanfare, just a collective shift in focus, reporters straightening in their chairs, cameras adjusting, recorders clicking on. Marcus walked with steady steps, unhurried. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a dark blazer and a serious expression, not of anger, but of strength. Tanya sat in the front row with Malik on her lap, eyes alert. Jordan Ellis stood to the left of the stage, arms crossed. The air in the room was thick. It was the kind of moment where every word spoken would be etched into the collective memory of those watching. Marcus stood before the microphone. He looked at the audience, then at the front row, and finally at the reporters. He took a deep breath. He didn't read from notes. He spoke because he had to. "My name is Marcus Johnson. I'm a detective. I'm a father. I'm a man who swore to protect lives. And today I'm here to defend the most simple and precious one of all, that of a 5-year-old child. Absolute silence. Last week, my son was publicly accused of a crime he didn't commit. He was treated as a threat for simply playing with a toy car he found on the ground in a park. And why?" He paused, looked again toward the back of the room. "Because he is black." The silence shifted into tightly held tension. No one dared move. What hurts me most isn't just what was said to him. It's what could have happened if Tanya, his nanny, hadn't been there, if she hadn't recorded it, if no one had seen. How many times do stories like this happen and get buried? How many children are scarred for life by a lie no one ever sees? He gripped the microphone firmly but didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence said everything. "My son is not a symbol. He's a little boy, a curious kid who loves toy cars and is afraid of the dark." But that afternoon, someone looked at him and saw a criminal, someone who didn't know him, who never looked into his eyes. They only saw color and judged. A journalist in the back wiped away a discreet tear. Others simply nodded in solemn agreement. When an adult accuses a black child of theft without proof, without hesitation, what they're teaching is that that child doesn't have the right to be innocent. That's more than a mistake. That's a trauma. And we're not going to accept it anymore. He stopped, removed the microphone from the stand, holding it in his left hand. This case won't end with a settlement. This is about change, about holding accountable those who've acted with impunity for too long. We're not seeking revenge. We're demanding justice. Because justice is what ensures no other father has to hold his child in his arms and hear, "Daddy, I just wanted to play." Outside, a crowd had gathered, watching the conference on large screens. Signs read, "Justice for Malik. Being a child is not a crime and no more disguised racism." When Marcus stepped down from the podium, he didn't seek out the cameras. He went straight to Tanya and Malik. The boy jumped off her lap and ran to his father, wrapping his arms around his leg. "I saw you on TV, Daddy. You talked nice." Marcus smiled with his eyes, knelt down, and ran his hand over his son's head. "I spoke for you, and for everyone who still doesn't know if they're allowed to speak." Tanya watched the scene, eyes full. She had never doubted Marcus's strength, but in that moment, she saw his tenderness too, a quiet firmness, the kind that doesn't shout but moves the world just by being there. Jordan stepped up. "The conference is already going viral," she said. "It's everywhere, and Marcus, you moved the country." He stood, straightened his blazer, and answered simply, "I don't want to move the country. I want to change the path my son walks." Hours later, the speech was circulating across social media with captions, clips, and translations in multiple languages. The video of Karen had become historic, but now it was Marcus's response that was taking center stage. People shared it with comments like, "This is what a real father does. This man spoke for all of us. This is how change begins." The official city account posted the video with the caption, "When justice speaks, even silence listens." In her hotel room, Karen watched alone. She sat with a plate of untouched food beside her. Her eyes were fixed on Marcus's face, on the strength in his voice. For the first time, she didn't feel anger or a need to defend herself. She felt only shame. And maybe, for the first time, she understood the weight of what she had done. His words weren't violent. They weren't vengeful. They were raw truth, and that hurt more than any scream. She lowered her face, closed her eyes, and there, in silence, began to cry. At home, Malik slept peacefully for the first time in days. The green toy car rested on the nightstand. Marcus entered the room, looked at his son, and turned off the light. As he turned to leave, Tanya stood in the doorway. "He heard you today," she said softly. "Everyone did." Marcus simply nodded. He wasn't one for long speeches. He just said, It was time someone spoke, and I was there. Then he closed the door, leaving his son to sleep in peace. The sky over Madison dawned under thick clouds, but the atmosphere in the streets told a different story. Hot, restless, alive. Posters plastered on poles, protest slogans painted on walls, banners hanging from balconies and windows. Malik's face, shy and smiling in a photo taken during a past awareness campaign, had resurfaced, now with a new phrase beneath it: "Let the children be." This was no longer just about Karen Whitmore, it was about the entire nation. Newspapers like the New York Times, The Guardian, and The Washington Post published editorials with blunt headlines: "When being black makes even childhood a risk. Childhood interrupted by a pointing finger. The Malik Johnson case, the exposed wound of everyday racism." Influencers, artists, and community leaders were speaking out. Peaceful protests formed in major cities. Black children were now featured in empowerment campaigns. Schools organized classroom discussions about discrimination in early childhood. The case had become a symbol, and Malik, still far too young to grasp the magnitude of it all, carried on his shoulders the weight of a country trying to heal centuries-old wounds. At Jordan Ellis's office, emails were piling up. "I've received interview requests from the BBC, CNN, NPR, even a South African non-profit," she said, while reviewing documents in front of Marcus. "They're asking you to speak again. And they want Tanya there too." Marcus didn't lift his eyes from the paperwork. "We didn't start this to be seen. We just didn't want what happened to go unpunished." Jordan studied him closely. She admired that quiet strength, never arrogance, just something deep-rooted. The posture of a man who understood the value of silence, but also the weight of his voice. "I know, but now it's a door, and when a door opens, you either walk through it or someone closes it again." He took a breath. He didn't like the spotlight, but he never shied from responsibility. "Tanya should speak. She saw it all. She lives this every day." Jordan nodded. "And you? Will you go with her?" "Always." Across town, Karen read the same articles. An old photo from her Facebook had been pulled into a blog piece titled, "The Woman Who Accused a Child and Awoke a Nation's Fury." She was now officially marked, the target of jokes, commentary, and think pieces. Her face had become a meme. Her name was now slang among teenagers online. Careful, don't go full Karen on the waiter. Another case of blatant Whitmoreism. At first, Karen screamed to herself that it was unfair, that it wasn't like that people were exaggerating. But the days wore her down. When she went out, she wore a hat and mask and still felt the stares. She stopped answering calls. Friends disappeared. And the $500,000 lawsuit kept moving forward. Her bank account frozen, her car seized, her house put up for sale. She tried finding work in another city, but her name was everywhere. "We don't hire individuals with a racial litigation history," they told her. Deep down, she knew. This wasn't just about one accusation. It was about a pattern, about something that had always lived inside her, and that day at the park had come out with the full violence of a prejudice usually left unspoken. At the Johnson home, the atmosphere was different. Little Malik was coloring in the living room, while Tanya washed dishes, and Marcus spoke with Jordan about the upcoming interview. "How's he handling all of this?" the lawyer asked. Tanya answered without turning around. "He understands more than he lets on, but we protect what needs protecting, and he's surrounded by love. That's more than a lot of kids get." Marcus looked at his son, who was drawing two stick figures holding hands in front of a park. One wore a yellow shirt and held a green toy car. The other was tall, bearded, and standing beside him. "Is that you?" Marcus asked, approaching. Malik smiled. "Yeah. And you? We're at the park. There's a camera, too." Marcus looked at the drawing for a moment, then knelt beside his son and gently touched his shoulder. "Never stop drawing the truth, son. That's how we change the world." The following week, Tanya was interviewed live on one of the country's biggest talk shows. The host asked, "When you started recording, did you know what it meant?" Tanya looked directly into the camera. She was simple but elegant, her hair neatly tied, her expression unwavering. I knew that if I didn't film it, no one would believe me, and they definitely wouldn't believe Malik. They had already chosen a culprit, just based on the color of his skin. It was my word against a white woman screaming, and our stories have always been silenced, but this time it was on record. The studio audience applauded. The host smiled respectfully, without embellishment. Do you believe things are changing? Tanya took a deep breath. I believe change starts when someone says, enough. And that day, I said it. Outside, protests continued to spread. Murals of Malik's face were painted on the walls of public schools. Children in yellow t-shirts carried green toy cars in silent marches. A boy had become a symbol, not because he wanted to, but because his pain had been seen. And now, the country was seeing. The courtroom was full. It wasn't a criminal trial, but the room felt prepared for something historic. Cameras were positioned discreetly above, capturing everything with authorized distance. Journalists filled the back rows, notebooks open, fingers poised to type every word. Regular citizens occupied the remaining seats, some out of curiosity, others out of genuine indignation. In the front row, Karen Whitmore sat with her head down, between her attorney and an expression she no longer knew how to hide. Her face was pale, the lines deeper than they had been 2 months ago, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. There was no pride left, no reaction, only weight. On the other side of the room, Marcus Johnson stood beside Jordan Ellis. He wore a dark suit, freshly shaved, with the same firm gaze the country had come to recognize. Beside him, Tanya held Malik's hand. The boy, with headphones on and a coloring book in his lap, quietly drew as he waited for the session to begin. The judge, a middle-aged white man known for his balanced demeanor, entered and took his seat. This hearing concerns the civil suit filed by the Johnson family against Karen Whitmore for child abuse, with the aggravating factor of racial injury, he announced. The court has heard the witnesses, reviewed the audiovisual material, and considered the statements submitted. Today we deliver the ruling. The silence was absolute. Malik glanced up briefly, but Tanya gently guided him back to his drawing. The judge took a breath before continuing. This court recognizes the occurrence of an abusive, aggressive, and racially discriminatory incident carried out by Ms. Whitmore against a 5-year-old child. The unfounded accusation of theft, the threatening tone, and the language used constitute not only an attack on the child's dignity, but also a clear reflection of structural prejudice. Karen closed her eyes. Her body stiffened. Given the documented psychological impact, the public scope of the case, and the need for moral reparation, this court orders the defendant to pay the Johnson family $500,000. A quiet murmur swept through the room. In the back, a woman muttered a soft, "Serves her right," quickly hushed by another journalist. The judge raised his hand, signaling for silence. This amount is to be paid as compensation, with all applicable legal measures to be enforced in case of non-compliance. In addition, the defendant must complete a racial re-education program and serve 100 hours of community service in organizations focused on children. Karen remained still. She no longer cried. She seemed hollowed out. The judge concluded, "This session is adjourned." Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Signs held high, cameras pointed, voices buzzing with anticipation. As Marcus, Tanya, Jordan, and Malik exited through the main doors, applause erupted. Marcus raised a hand in acknowledgement, but didn't stop. He walked forward steadily, Malik at his side. Despite the noise, the boy appeared calm, shielded by the presence of a father who had become a symbol to many. A reporter approached, microphone extended. "Detective Johnson, any comment after the ruling?" Marcus paused briefly, met the reporter's gaze, and said simply, "Justice served. May this never happen to another child again." Jordan added, "Today wasn't just a win for the Johnson family. It was a response from the system to the silent violence that too often goes ignored. Today, that response was loud and clear." Back at her home hours later, Karen packed the last boxes. The house would soon be turned over to the realtor. Sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by fragments of a not-so-distant past. She held in her hands an official asset seizure notice. Her name printed at the top felt distant now, as if it no longer belonged to her, but to a version of herself that had been dragged through, judged, and finally dismantled. She read the sentence again, this time in silence. No tears, no reaction, just the bitter acceptance that now there was no going back. Meanwhile, at a community center on the city's south side, a freshly painted mural was getting its finishing touches. It was bright and colorful. It showed Malik, in childlike style, wearing a yellow shirt and holding a green toy car, surrounded by children of all colors. Above them, a simple phrase, "Childhood is sacred. Protect all childhoods." Malik looked at the painting and smiled. Tanya, standing beside him, wrapped an arm around his shoulders. "All of this here, it's because you were so brave." He looked up at her with innocence. "But I just wanted to play." She laughed gently. "Sometimes just playing is how we change everything." In the final scene of the night, Marcus sat on the couch, Malik asleep in his lap, headphones now off. Tanya closed the living room curtains. Jordan read a few messages silently, already preparing for the next press event, but at peace. The house was calm. The fight had been faced. And for the first time in a long time, something rare filled the air. Rest. Every seat was filled in the auditorium of Malcolm Turner Public School in the heart of Madison. The space had been set up for the school's annual end-of-semester ceremony, but tonight it was more than that. The atmosphere carried something deeper, a mix of reverence, emotion, and something greater, a sense of transformation. On stage, the lights were dim, and the podium at center stage stood ready for the final speech of the evening. Students of all ages had performed, parents had applauded, teachers had received flowers. But now the school principal stood to deliver the official closing, his eyes reflecting both pride and anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said firmly into the microphone, "this semester we witnessed something that reached beyond the walls of this school and touched our entire community. And tonight we have the honor of closing this chapter by hearing not just from a father, but from a voice that rose up when the whole world needed to listen." The audience rose in applause as Marcus Johnson walked onto the stage. He wore a dark suit, no tie, the collar of his white shirt unbuttoned. He walked with the same steady presence that had defined him from the start, a quiet strength, never loud, but always certain. He stopped at the microphone, waited for the room to fall silent again, and then began. "2 months ago, my son Malik was accused of stealing. He was at a park, playing, holding a green toy car, nothing more. And even then, he was treated as guilty." He paused. The room was silent, hanging on every word. That day, someone saw him as a threat, not because he did anything wrong, but because of the color of his skin. Someone thought that just being there with a toy was enough to make him suspicious. Someone screamed, pointed, and if it hadn't been for Tanya's courage, a black woman, so often unseen, but with a phone in her hand and resolve in her heart, maybe no one would have believed us. Tanya, seated in the front row, lowered her head. Malik, beside her, played absently with the same green toy car. There was no sound more beautiful in that moment than the respectful silence surrounding that boy. "But the world saw," Marcus continued. "The video spread. And what started as an injustice became a movement. People responded. Schools held discussions. Laws were questioned. All because, finally, someone saw the truth. And because Malik had someone to stand up for him." He stepped closer to the podium, pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, and opened it slowly. "Daddy, I just wanted to play." That's what my son said that day. 5 words. But within them lives the dream of thousands of children just like him, who just want to exist, to laugh, to run, to live without fear of being mistaken for criminals before they even grow up. Eyes in the crowd welled with tears. Others stared, jaws tight. And all of them in some way felt the weight of those words. That's why I'm here, to remind us that justice isn't only punishing the guilty. Justice is protecting the innocent. Justice means ensuring that every childhood, black, white, poor, marginalized, has the same right to play, And that when you see a child, you see a future, not a threat. He paused, looked out across the audience. Today, Malik is playing again. But what about the others? How many more Maliks will be interrupted by pointing fingers, by the screams of those who don't see children, only the shadows of their own fears? Marcus looked toward his son and concluded, "Let this country learn from my child, learn from his pain, remember the nanny's courage, honor every step taken since, and may we live to see a day when no child ever needs to be defended from a lie shouted into the air." The audience stood in applause, long, deep. Some embraced, others remained quiet, still absorbing every word, but all of them in some way left changed. Later that night outside the school, Malik ran across the playground with the toy car in his hands. Tanya watched with her usual calm gaze. Marcus stepped beside her in silence. "Do you think he'll remember this when he grows up?" she asked. "Maybe not the details, but he'll remember he was protected. That's enough." Tanya nodded. They stood in quiet, watching the boy spin with his arms wide open, laughing as the green car flew in circles around him. Across the street, a woman watched from a distance. She wore a loose coat, her hair pulled back, her face half hidden. It was Karen. No one recognized her, but she recognized the moment, and inside, she knew this wasn't about her. It was about everything she had failed to see, and that now she could never unsee. She turned and walked away slowly, alone. Back at the park where it all began, a new sign had been installed beside the slide. At this spot, a boy was wrongly accused, but his truth was seen. Here now, every child has the right to play in peace. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden light over the grass. Malik came running, toy car in hand, Tanya laughing behind him. He climbed the slide and shouted with joy. At the bottom, Marcus stood with arms open, waiting. This time there were no screams, no fingers pointing, only childhood and justice, finally, together.